There's an organization whose entire job is helping people choose careers that do the most good. On its own website, there's a page titled Our Mistakes. Most entries are what you'd expect. Advice that was too confident, a number that turned out to be soft. But one isn't like the others. For years, they'd featured a particular young man on their site as the model, proof the whole approach worked. Their words afterwards, a mistake we now regret. He's serving 25 years, and he's been ordered to forfeit $11 billion. So the question isn't whether this book is any good. If the most careful people working on this problem backed the wrong horse that badly, which parts should you still believe? Start with the number in the title. 40 years, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, 80,000 hours. It's a round figure, not a measurement, and it does one job. This is the largest single block of time you will ever allocate. The argument is that a decision that size shouldn't be handed to your gut, which brings us to the advice everyone gives anyway. Follow your passion. Psychologists spent decades trying to show that matching your job to your interests predicts whether you'll be happy in it. The effects were weak. That's not a hot take. It's the conclusion of the research review that same organization published itself. Here's what does hold up. Engaging work, variety, autonomy, real feedback, correlates with satisfaction at about 0.41 from a meta-analysis of 259 studies. Work that visibly helps somebody, also 0.41. The strongest number in the set? 0.56. Support from the people you work with, which is awkward because almost every summary of this book tells you the key ingredient is helping others. Measured, it matters about as much as autonomy and slightly less than whether your colleagues have your back. Fine. So you need a way to compare where your hours actually land. A doctor called Greg Lewis ran that calculation on his own profession. Start with the average. A UK doctor produces something like 2,600 quality-adjusted life years across a career. Call it 90 lives. Then he started subtracting. Diminishing returns first. The most valuable medical work is already being done, so an extra doctor picks up what's left. 90 drops to about 7, then replacement. If you don't take the training place, somebody roughly as capable does. Adjust for that, and you land near 20. One harder pass came out at 1 or 2. 90, 7, 20, 2. Same profession, same evidence. 4 answers, spanning 2 orders of magnitude, depending entirely on which question you thought you were asking. Lewis published it anyway. He'd trained as a doctor. He wrote what his own organization calls a fairly downbeat guide to medical careers, then left clinical medicine for biosecurity research at Oxford, working on catastrophic pandemic risk. In early 2020, that turned out to be a relevant place to be standing. So does the leverage argument survive contact with reality? Sometimes spectacularly. Smallpox killed around 300 million people in the 20th century alone. May 1958, Minneapolis. The Soviet Union turns up at the World Health Assembly for the first time in 9 years, and a deputy health minister named Viktor Zhdanov argues this particular disease can be wiped out because humans are the only thing it lives in, and because freeze-drying now lets vaccines survive the journey. The vote goes his way, unanimously. The version you usually hear ends there. One man, one speech, disease gone. That's not what happened. The program he won stalled for the better part of a decade. The campaign that actually finished the job started in 1967 and ran until 1980. Total cost of that campaign, about $300 million. I'll just put those two numbers next to each other. 300 million dead, $300 million. And that is exactly the calculation that gets people into trouble. Because if leverage is the whole game, follow it one step further. You don't need to be in the field, you need to fund it. Take the highest paying job you can hold, give away 30, 40, 50%, and pay for several people to do the work instead of one. It's called earning to give. And for a while, it was the movement's signature idea. It needed a success story. It got one, a physics undergraduate who'd heard the pitch from a co-founder of that same organization, got pointed toward a quantitative trading firm, and eventually built a crypto exchange. FTX customers lost somewhere around $8 billion. Here's where it would be easy and wrong to say the whole philosophy was rotten, because the quiet version of that idea has been running the whole time. 11,160 people have pledged 10% or more of what they earn for life. Over $500 million given. No collapse, no indictment. 10% didn't break anything. What broke was the decision to treat more as the only instruction. Their own post-mortem names it, that an unusual willingness to fully embrace naive maximizing fed into the decisions behind the collapse. So in May 2023, they published the diff. Sam went back on the site as a negative example. They wrote in more skepticism about ambitious earning to give. They cut the language of maximizing and optimizing and started talking about doing more good rather than the most good. They put character back in. That page keeps older confessions too. That they'd become too closely associated with earning to give in the first place. That their career capital advice made people think the answer was consulting when it wasn't. And that when they checked their own impact estimate, they'd overstated it by a factor of 2. Even the timing advice needed fixing. The comfortable version says the big breakthroughs come between 40 and 60, so relax. The actual study of Nobel laureates and great inventors puts the average age of a person's greatest work at 39. 72% lands in the 30s and 40s, only 14% after 50. Narrower window than you were promised, though it's drifting later, about 6 years over the last century, because there's more to learn before you can add anything. So, back to the question. What survives, not the conclusions. Those moved, and they'll move again. What survives is that somebody wrote down where they were wrong, with dates, in public, where it costs them something. That's the part you can copy tonight, and it takes 10 minutes. Open a file, write today's date, then 3 lines. What I believe about where my work should go. What would have to happen for that to be wrong. And what I was sure about 5 years ago that I'd now write differently. That's the whole method. You've just built the thing that makes every other framework in this book safe to use. And if you want to test the neglectedness idea while you're there, dedicated AI safety funding ran north of $200 million last year. The capital expenditure for tech companies guided for this year is around $725 billion. Those two numbers measure different things. Not that different. So tell me the third one. What were you certain about 5 years ago that you'd write down differently today? Put it in the comments. Genuinely, the most interesting thing anyone could leave under this video. One last thing. This book came out in May, 3 months ago, completely rewritten, with new chapters on building a career around AI, which is the argument, really. The people worth listening to about the future aren't the ones who were right the first time. They're the ones who published the correction.